In that Milan arena, something strange occurred. Something more subdued than a fall or an error. The crowd sensed it once the judges first noticed it, and the booth became silent. Because Alysa Liu was grinning throughout the most tense 4 minutes of figure skating. A genuine smile, the kind you wear when having fun, not one for the camera. And that was the most peculiar aspect. The others appeared frightened. Finals shouldn't appear joyful. They are meant to resemble survival. So why did she wind up changing the entire night while skating like someone who had already come to terms with losing? That evening, the quiet in the arena felt oppressive. Thick, but not loud or dramatic. The stillness that descends upon thousands of people when they realize something significant is about to take place. It was in Milan in February of 2026. The last performances of the women's Olympic figure skating final had been completed. The audience had already witnessed amazing routines by that time in the evening. Triple leaps, nearly flawless spins, and surgically precise programs. However, the final skater created a distinct vibe. Additionally, she entered the ice with a relaxed, almost casual gait, as though it were a practice rink rather than an Olympic final. The anxiety in the stadium was not reflected in her posture. The majority of skaters at that time have noticeable shoulder weight. It's evident in the way they take a breath before the music begins. In just 4 minutes, the strain of years, even decades, was focused. However, Alysa appeared at ease, possibly even amused. Before the music started, one of the TV analysts pointed it out in a low voice. Take a look at her face. She seemed to be totally at ease. The stakes were so high that it was odd to be calm. An entire generation of skaters had come and gone in an attempt to rectify the fact that no American woman had won Olympic gold in figure skating since 2002. The strain of that drought had turned into an unseen foe of its own. Alysa Liu appeared to be carrying nothing, yet every American skater who made it to the Olympic stage carried it. She launched off the ice with a fluid, nearly effortless glide as the first notes of the song reverberated throughout the arena. Often everything is shown in the opening few seconds of a routine. Hesitancy is evident. Nerves are visible. When an athlete is skating cautiously and attempting to avoid mistakes, you can see it. However, Alysa didn't appear to be moving with caution. They appeared liberated. With a cadence that was more akin to dancing than competition, her edges sliced over the ice. And initially, that difference was not really noticeable. The first leap, a triple combination that the talented top skaters had done thousands of times in training, arrived swiftly. She made a smooth landing. The audience gave courteous applause. Nothing out of the ordinary yet. But then something else took place. Alysa allowed the movement to breathe rather than jumping right onto the next phase with the stiff intensity that most skaters exhibit. With her shoulders relaxed and her arms loose, she lengthened the glide. A space moment. It seems more like someone listening to music than someone performing choreography. After that, there was another leap and a flawless landing. The technical panel observing from the ringside had already begun scoring by this time. Every landing counts in Olympic skating. The smoothness with which a skater departs a jump is equally as important as its completion. Control, speed, and flow. Additionally, judges consistently appreciate Alysa's landings. Momentum. Instead of pausing, each leap continued forward. No obvious strain, no hurried recuperation. The routine kept growing. Another flawless triple leap, spin, and footwork combination. However, the technical consistency wasn't the only thing that spectators in the arena started to notice. It was the way she looked. The majority of Olympic skaters keep what coaches refer to as a performance face. Concentrated, in control, a little aloof, a mask that conceals anxiety. Alysa was not wearing one. She once produced a brief, fun smile that resembled a tiny whoop's face after landing a jump a little off-center. However, the cameras recorded it, and the commentators started laughing. Not because she made a mistake, but rather because she responded human-like rather than robotically. At the Olympic level, that hardly ever occurs. Athletes are now taught to suppress their emotions. Errors are quickly hidden under discipline. However, Alysa's response was short-lived as she moved straight into the following action. The audience reacted right away. The applause intensified. Compared to the other routines that evening, this one felt lighter, less stressful, and more vibrant. Additionally, the arena's rhythm started to shift as the program approached its halfway point. In the crowd, you could hear it. The audience began to react more quickly, cheering mid-rhyme, clapping in between elements, and building energy instead of the nervous silence that typically follows every landing, the moment when thousands of people hold their breath, waiting to see if the skater stays upright. This was because by that point, people were beginning to notice something strange. Alysa Liu wasn't skating with the intention of defending a score. In a sport that relies heavily on pressure, she was skating with a sense of enjoyment. That distinction appeared to be almost defiant. The arena was no longer silent by the time the music reached its last peak. It was living. However, the crowd's responses weren't the most intriguing. The athletes monitoring the monitor could see something, so they were coming from the other skaters who were waiting backstage. The spectators was only starting to realize that Alysa Liu wasn't using caution as she skated. She wasn't using safe skating techniques. She was undoubtedly not terrified to skate. And that was the riskiest thing that happened on that ice, more so than any leap. The energy rising in the arena was extremely different from the vibe backstage. While Alysa Liu was skating in brilliant lights from the television cameras, a different scene was silently taking on behind the curtain. A few of the other contenders were positioned close to the live broadcast monitor. It's not because they love it that figure skaters always watch their competitors' final performances. They don't most of the time, but the scoreboard relies on it. The equation is altered with each landing. The pressure changes with each jump. Additionally, what they saw on the screen was out of the ordinary. Not because Alysa was working on the most challenging program of the evening. She wasn't. Earlier in the final, a few other skaters had tried quadruple leaps. Higher base value, risk, and return are associated with those leaps. They carry something else, though. Dread. Quadruple jumps are quite challenging. Every attempt is tense because even the world's greatest skaters frequently fall on them. Muscles stiffen. Timing becomes brittle. The jump falls after a brief delay. Throughout the entire competition, that tension was evident. A few of skaters with nearly frozen looks entered the rink earlier in the evening. Before the music began, one athlete stood at center ice for about 30 seconds, breathing deeply and gazing at the rink. Before making her first leap, another skater was clearly shaking her hands in an attempt to calm her fingers. That was nothing out of the ordinary. People are affected in that way by Olympic finals. Years of training are condensed into 4 minutes for the event. Thousands of hours, sacrifices made during childhood, expectations from family members, and pressure from the country were all precariously balanced. Athletes' movements are altered by that type of weight. Their stance, the way their shoulders lift slightly before leaps, and the way they skate a little more cautiously than normal are all signs of it. Because errors at the Olympic level make headlines in addition to costing points. The skaters who were waiting backstage were fully aware of the pressure. The majority of them had chased this moment their entire lives. Some started training at the age of 5 before they fully grasped the meaning of competition and the potential consequences of pressure. By the time they made it to the Olympic stage, the sport had already molded their lives around a single goal: to win or, at the very least, to live error-free. However, observing Alysa Liu on the screen, there was something strange about the way she moved. As Alysa made another flawless jump, one skater reportedly leaned closer to the TV. The way she landed the jump was more stunning than the jump itself. The speed continued across the ice without hesitation or quick correction. Coaches refer to this type of landing as flow. Because worried skaters tend to stiffen their muscles during jumps, that aspect is more important than most onlookers realize. The landing becomes rigid even if they land successfully. Momentum ceases. The software starts to become a little robotic. However, Alysa's landings continued to move. That implied something significant. She wasn't tense when she skated. She was having a great time, and loose skaters are risky competitors because consistency increases when fear vanishes. Later on in the program, one of the commentators gave a straightforward explanation of it. She doesn't appear to be defending anything. The sound of that sentence lingered in the atmosphere. Olympic athletes typically defend something, safeguarding years of labor, reputation, and rankings. However, Alysa Liu had already accomplished something that very few Olympic competitors ever do. Once, she had given up on the sport. Alysa made a move that stunned the skating community in 2022, soon after the Beijing Winter Olympics. She declared her retirement at the age of 16, which is younger than many athletes entering their heyday. No lengthy goodbye tour, no gradual transition. Just like that, she took a step back. She then clarified in interviews that skating was no longer enjoyable at the moment. The sport had become heavy due to years of competition, and she was no longer familiar with it. When an athlete gets there, they often have two choices: get through it or walk away. After Alysa left, an extremely rare event occurred during the following 2 years. Her life ceased to revolve on skating for the first time since childhood. There would be no daily training regimen, no weekly competitions, no scores, just everyday living, college classes, friends, travel, and experiences that most great athletes would never have during their competitive years. When Alysa eventually resumed skating in 2024, her motivation had altered as a result of those 2 years. She was no longer pursuing aspirations. While other skaters carried the burden of everything they had given up to compete in the Olympics, she had already managed to elude them once, and that distinction was subtly apparent on the Milan rink. It appeared as though Alysa Liu had nothing more to prove. Because athletes are more adept at identifying emotional states than spectators, the skaters monitoring the monitor backstage could perceive the difference. They are familiar with the appearance of terror. They are aware of how pressure affects motion. Alysa Liu wasn't skating with either of those objects as they could see. Her competitors found it extremely uncomfortable because she was skating freely. It becomes nearly impossible to stop someone like that if they start landing every jump.
Backstage, a quiet realization started to take shape as the routine approached its final components. Perhaps this isn't just another flawless Olympic performance. This could be something completely different, something that none of them had anticipated. Because the athlete trying the hardest elements isn't always the most dangerous in a final. Sometimes it's the person who is no longer terrified. The peculiar aspect of that Milan Olympic routine didn't start in the arena. Almost no one in that throng was aware that it had truly begun 2 years prior. For the first time in a long time, Alysa Liu entered a public skating rink in California in the beginning of 2024. There were only a few recreational skaters circling slowly under fluorescent lights, a quiet ring, the faint scrape of blades on ice, and no cameras, federation officials, or Olympic expectations. Alysa Liu was not a candidate for the Olympics at the time. She didn't even participate in competitions. She had been something extremely uncommon in professional sports for almost 2 years, a former prodigy who just vanished. The skating community was taken aback when she announced her retirement in 2022. Olympic athletes often reach their peak in their 20s, though some do so later. However, Alysa left at the age of 16, when many athletes her age were only starting senior contests. The choice appeared perplexing to those who were not involved in the sport. Why go so early? However, figure skaters were aware of something that the general public sometimes overlooks. Prodigies endure tremendous pressure. Expectations swiftly developed as soon as Alysa became well known across the country. She became the youngest U.S. national champion in decades at the age of 13, a record that immediately altered her career's course.